Hello and welcome to this Ray Youth Research Dialogue. This episode is part of our regularly conducted series, where we discuss evidence-based youth research findings from the Ray Network and beyond. My name is Carmen Tobel-Kiviniemi. I'm coordinating the European Youth Research Network Ray, which is hosted by the Finnish National Agency for Education, and the Ray Network itself involves 36 partners in 34 countries, including national agencies responsible for the European youth programs and national research partners. I want to wish you a happy Ray Day. Today is our European-wide Ray Communication Day, and this episode of the Youth Research Dialogue takes place as part of our communication activities. What is the Ray Day? Well, all Ray partners on national levels and also on the coordination level are involved in that. And we try, by bundling our efforts and implementing a range of diverse activities today or also in the upcoming days, we try to enhance the visibility of the network. We want to support our research dissemination efforts and want to communicate our work to different stakeholders on national levels and transnational levels. If you want to dive a bit deeper, you can also check out our Ray social media channels. We are running, or we have been already running a campaign throughout the whole day today. And also on our website, we published a Ray Day article with a very nice Ray video, the so-called Ray Network documentary, where you can dive deeper in our work, and we share memories, impressions, and interviews from the last 4 years. But now to today's topic, youth research in the past 15 years, looking back and moving forward. We will discuss insights, surprising facts, and highlights from the Ray research across all our projects, thought-provoking and maybe startling facts and figures about the European youth programs and beyond. And we will complement this time travel by a discussion on future needs, including what is next for the youth for youth research. Is the field ready for what's ahead? And how do we make sure that we support stakeholders within youth work and the youth policy field, and that they are equipped to make sense of the finding and use them? Our guest speaker today is Sladjana Petkovic. She is a senior European and UN youth and development expert with expertise in managing and conducting research over 20 years. She is applying a participatory and human rights-centered approach and to support decision-making and service design to preserve youth and children's rights. Since 2010, she has been also supporting with her expertise the European youth programs, and she is part of European cooperations in the field of youth, such as the pool of European youth researchers currently in the advisory group. And this is hosted by the EU and Council Youth Partnership. A very warm welcome to you, Sladjana. Andreas Karsten, our Ray Transnational Research Coordinator, will be our Ray speaker today. He leads a small team of participatory research, public policy, and open data aficionados. They are based in Berlin at Youth Policy Labs. Welcome to you also, Andreas. And last but not least, our team today. I want to say also hi and thank you, Özkan Senwa, who is joining us today for this episode as our moderator. Özkan knows Ray very well. He has been involved in national research and is representing Ray in various settings and spaces, and is also part of our facilitation team for our network meetings. Also welcome to you, Özkan. And as always, Domagoj Moric will be our digital facilitator. That's all from my side. Have a good dialogue, and now to you, Özkan.
Welcome to this edition of the RAY Youth Research Dialogue. Today we are marking 15 years of RAY, research-based analysis of European youth programs. Hello, my name is Özgehan Şenyuva, and I will be your guest moderator today. Before we dive into the discussion, I would like to remind the audience about the great possibility to join us in the dialogue. We invite you to ask questions either on the Facebook or YouTube chats or via Slido. Simply go to slido.com and type in the code, which is displayed on the screen. So, I suggest that we start with our dialogue with our two great speakers. But let us have a little exercise before we dive in. Let's think about how we imagine time and particularly the future. During my research on future and time, it was interesting to find out that some South African tribes, the future is imagined as behind us, not normally as we imagine forward. So the future is behind us and the past is in front of us. They say that we walk backwards into the future. We can only see the past and the present, while the future is something we cannot yet see. In contrast, in most European languages and traditions, we imagine ourselves walking forward into the future with the past left behind us. This contrast invites a fascinating reflection for us today. How do we, as youth researchers, practitioners, imagine the future? What do we think we are moving toward, and what can we truly see? So, our two exceptional guests will help us to explore this. Let's start with the view from where we stand today, looking back at 15 years of youth research in Europe. Sladjana, nice to see you. And please, when you look back as a very experienced youth researcher, one who has always worked on diverse and innovative topics, what do you see?
Hi, Özge. Hi, everyone. Happy Raid Day. I have to start with a little bit of the intro, which is not directly linked to the youth research, but it has to do with time. As an experienced meditator, I prefer to see time as spherical, not the linear category, right? But when we talk about the youth research and history of it, I'm afraid we need to dive a bit deeper than the 15 years, having in mind that maybe at the late 60s, even Council of Europe recognized the need to acknowledge, the importance of collecting information on the situation of young people in order to understand better the social change, for example. The time is super limited, so we all know that this topic is very complex, but maybe for the sake of this dialogue, let's just mention a few key milestones. I would say that's important just to remind us that, for example, the European Commission in the 2001, included the better knowledge on youth as one of its 4 principles. And then ever since continued to advocate for evidence-based, information-based, and knowledge-based approach to youth policy and youth work nowadays. We have several important documents like obviously the EU strategy 2010 and then the current one, which are reinforcing the importance of youth research, but I'm really curious to see what's going to happen and what will be the place of youth research in the next cycle, right, in the new EU strategy. Maybe it's important to understand that the let's say, concept and the nature of youth research also evolved and changed a lot over the decades. So, we know that the youth research was struggling quite a lot to be recognized as relevant discipline, and it was always linked to psychology, to different disciplines like psychology, sociology, economics, political sciences, and so on. because, as we also know, the lives of young people are super complex, and it's not enough to research them and to explore, to do the inquiry only from one point, right, from one perspective. When it comes to, like, briefly to the Council of Europe, maybe we can start from the backwards. Very recently, I think we witnessed like super important political milestone when, after 13 years, the Council of Europe and the ministers responsible for youth adopted the declaration and the recommendation on the reference framework of on youth perspective. So I would say this is important because it opens up the new avenue, and it also places youth research maybe more prominently on the governance map, right? So also a lot of fellow colleagues contributed in the background. We were working very hard on the topics like youth mainstreaming, youth perspective over the last 2 years. So basically today and tomorrow there is this international conference hosted by the Youth Partnership, particularly focusing on the youth perspective and what has been done and what will be done in the future. So maybe I could stop here, and then we will catch up with the. We will mention the partnership also during our dialogue.
Yeah, I made a note about that, and I'm curious. Thank you, Sladjana. You mentioned very important points: struggle for recognition, the consilience, and the complexity of researching of young people. Well, focusing a bit more on the European youth programs from race perspective, where we have 15 years of data, several projects, a gigantic transnational cooperation. How has the understanding of youth and learning mobility evolved? And Andreas, while you're dealing with this, can you please maybe share with us what were the most meaningful insights, or perhaps the biggest surprises from the race studies across the period? And for those who are curious about race studies, let me remind you to visit the RAY website, because all the data, all the research, all the findings are waiting for you to explore if you didn't do so. Andreas?
Thank you, Eske, and thank you, Sladja. I actually snuck out of that very conference to join the Youth Research Dialogue here. And I think maybe I have the slightly easier job looking back, because I can look back at 15 years of quite a cohesive network and don't have to cover the whole youth research landscape. But I would say Ray has really come a long way. When we started out in 2008, it was 5 national agencies and their research partners, where we could just take a normal phone camera and still get everyone into a group picture. Nowadays, we need a professional photographer and a little bit of an arrangement, because, at our network meetings now, where we are around 100 people, we now are 36 partners in 34 countries, and cover a wide range of topics. But the backbone of our network has always been the monitoring service, which we do every 2 years, of project participants, project teams, beneficiary organizations in the European youth programs, as well as supporting mixed method research projects where we dive deeper into specific themes that we often discover through the monitoring service, which we do. And it's quite nice to see that this approach has been so consistent over 15 years and has proven its worth for small and big member states of the network and of the Union and the Council alike. When it comes to meaningful insights, now that's a hard one. I mean, it's not just meaningful, but most meaningful insights. And I have decided to start out with 2 I think very positive ones. The first one is that none of us, I think, in our field were surprised to see, proven by data again and again, that youth exchanges, that youth worker mobilities, that all the project formats of the European Youth Programme, solidarity projects, participation projects, you name them, that they all strengthen the empathy of participants towards other cultures, other languages, other contexts, other realities very, very strongly, and that people develop their empathy through their participation in the European Youth Programs. What did surprise, I think, many of us is that this is not an effect that wears off. So you come to another activity in the European Youth Programs 2 or 3 years after your first one maybe, and still that empathy development stays a strong factor. So it doesn't become, you know, something that you take for granted, or something where all of a sudden you have the feeling you have discovered the width and breadth of Europe and now you know it all. No, it's every time you participate in such an intercultural learning mobility setting again, you have the same kind of empathy empowerment, empathy boost, which I think is really cool to see over time, that even the people who return to the European Youth Programs, or who change their role from project participant to project team members, that they have that empathy boost, which I think is lovely. And then the second one, and I wish I had put the formula on a screen for Domagoj to show, was a very nerdy research project where we quantitatively looked at the effects, the learning effects, and how they relate to socioeconomic status and advantages and disadvantages of young people. And what we found out, I thought, was really, really amazing. I mean, I also thought the mathematics and statistics behind it were amazing, but the main outcome was that it makes little to no difference in the European Youth Programs what background you have and what background you bring with you. And what we know in other parts, in particular of formal education, as the Matthew effect of accumulated disadvantage. So the less advantage you have coming into an educational experience, the less you tend to learn and be empowered by it. The European Youth Programs don't have that kind of an effect. Not in the shorter formats, but also importantly, not in the longer formats like a one-year volunteering service experience. And I think that's a power of the European Youth Programs that we should put much more in the foreground than we have the courage to sometimes do.
Thank you, Andreas. And you mentioned from 5 to 40, the number of partners going from 5 to 36 in 34 countries. Yes. I think research is like a party. It's one of those places where more is better, more is more fun. And those are very interesting insights you shared. Sladjana, going back to what you mentioned, pool of European youth researchers, PAIR, you were one of the very first members of the pool of European youth researchers, which we both had the privilege of being part of, and you still serve in an advisory capacity today. Now, this was an interesting establishment. Looking back at PAIR's role over the past 2 decades, how do you see the contribution of such initiatives to European youth research, and particularly to the dialogue between research, policy, and practice? What kind of an impact do you think PAIR has, not just in terms of how many projects or reports, but in shaping a culture, shaping a common vocabulary for youth research in Europe?
Yes. Thank you for the question. It's been a while. I would say that my personal experience, and also what we can find in the literature when it comes to youth partnership, is really that it plays one of the most diplomatic roles, ever, when it comes to balancing between the two massive European institutions and their fields of youth. And obviously, each institution promotes its own interest, has its own agenda, and which is totally understandable. When it comes to youth partnership, and before the pool, actually, we had the network of researchers, and then the pool, and then the pool advisory group. It was very interesting for me to witness, the evolution of the pool and of the partnership as such. I would say that both the group of researchers gathered around the partnership, but also the partnership staff, which also changed over the years. is a group of super hardworking people, the group of committed people, and the place and the role and recognition of the partnership depends a lot on our individual and group efforts and the energy that we put into it, right? So I'm really proud, and sometimes it's not even it's surreal, where we are today comparing to 25 plus 27 already years back. I would say that the partnership played the pivotal role not only in creating spaces and the community of youth researchers across Europe, and in a way defining the profile of EU youth researcher, right? Or playing with it, exploring it, but also in creating spaces for the different sectors and different stakeholders to meet. The famous triangle with the young people in the middle, right? The policymakers and the youth researchers and the practitioners. Youth workers started to actively and proactively meet and discuss priorities and issues and the challenges in the youth field, not only related to youth policy, but also to youth work. Thanks to the partnership, I would say. Yeah, so I mean, the formality of it can be read. Also, I think that the website of the partnership, Domagoj, please share plenty of links that I have sent you for the people who are not familiar. The website of the partnership is a really useful resource, not only for the fellow colleagues and youth researchers and policymakers across Europe, but also for the newcomers. There has been systematic attempt not only to produce knowledge, but also to make it available and more closer to various audiences. Sometimes we know that the academic research and youth policy comparative analysis are not the easiest reading, right? Especially not the people who are not simple get used to it. On the other hand, I would say that the partnership provided opportunities for researchers to contribute and to shape the youth policy and the youth research agenda within the last 27 years in Europe. Yeah.
Thank you. Research can be a lonely process. Pair and Ray is one of those platforms where it helps us to get together and share notes, learn from each other. But research is also a lot about asking questions. So please ask questions to us as well. Be part of this dialogue. Remember, you can ask questions on Facebook, on YouTube, and Slido. And if you have come across Ray research or youth research in general, we are waiting for you to join our dialogue. And coming back to our metaphor from our introduction, that we are walking backwards into the future. What might be behind us waiting to be seen in youth research? Andreas, for instance, with your data, with your years of experience, with your communication with practitioners and policymakers and other researchers, what topics or areas do you see as needing immediate attention from this triangle, researchers, policymakers, and practitioners, especially in regards to European youth programs? What issues we cannot cancel anymore, what we need to produce, apply evidence quickly and effectively?
I would say the most important of the issues that we have in front of us as well as back behind us in a way is that we really are living through a pivotal moment in a really wild time, right? We see democracies within Europe, but also across oceans in either direction, crumbling at speeds that we did not think possible in our day and time. And many institutions whose strength we have taken for granted, even inside the European Union, turn out not to be as strong as we hoped they would be. And we will operate the European youth programs for the foreseeable future in an environment where democracy is not a given, where the universality of human rights is not a given anymore, and where peace and peacefulness is not a given anymore to the extent that it was used to. And that maybe my generation of having lived through a mostly peaceful revolution 30 years back is used to. And I think that's something that we have failed to acknowledge even as a possibility, and that we are, with the tools that we have, with the research that we undertake, with the educational, pedagogical, programmatical possibilities that we provide, that we were utterly unprepared for. That we now are an arena for defending something to an extent that we didn't think it would need to be defended. And I think we have to open our eyes to that and become much stronger advocates and actors for democracy and human rights and all the principles that we have always mentioned and lived in our educational practice. But now it becomes an issue of not just doing that in our educational practice and programs, but also steeling young people and ourselves to be able to do that in society much, much more than we used to. And so I would say that is, for me, by far the most standout challenge that we have from the past 15 years and probably for the next 15 years, as sad as that is.
What you said is very important. That some things we took for granted might become the subject of research again. Sladjana, the same question to you. What is ahead of us? And, but in a wider context of European Union, what topics or areas need immediate attention and research and evidence?
Yes, before we get into priority topics and potential priorities and issues and challenges, I would maybe like to remind ourselves and our audience that very roughly and technically we can diversify between the so-called youth research on the situation of young people from youth policy research, right? So there is a thin line between the two. When it comes to youth research on the situation of young people, I would say that the social change dictates and posts the different topics and areas of priority towards us. And in this regard, I understand youth researchers as really responsible party in a way, in terms of I truly believe that we have obligation to be proactive and to kind of to be aware of what's going on and to help others to understand what's going on by providing evidence and promoting the information-based policy making. When it comes to youth policy research, it's also enormous discussion point, but I would say that we are now at the crossroads, meaning that it's a very good momentum to reflect, to take the proactive role as youth researchers in Europe in terms of supporting with evidence, of course, the development of the new EU strategy, the revision of the EU youth programs, and so on and so forth. There are so many open areas, in which we can contribute. This could be also challenged, but I would say it's also an opportunity. So really, I would say that the role of youth researchers is to be celebrated and to be used in a way nowadays. When it comes to priority topics, for example, the partnership had different ways of approaching it, always based on participatory methods. The partnership collects the views of various stakeholders on what needs to be tackled within the next work plan, yearly work plan, or biannual work plan. So, for example, the 24-25 work plan is focused on 3 topics, but apart from that, like the rural youth, mental health and well-being, and also participation as the cross-cutting and never ending. priority, but also apart from that, we were working on supporting both, especially both institutions actually, in developing their policy documents on youth mainstreaming and youth perspective, which really, I would say, sets the new playground for all of us for the future.
Thank you. And we have several questions, several comments coming, but one of them is particularly interesting because we have been talking about the success of youth research showing that things work. But one audience member asked, where does youth research fail or maybe need to do better? A little bit of criticism. Andreas, first you, then Sladjana.
That's a long list, to be honest. I mean, if you know, I think most watchers, listeners, and I think all of us here know this feeling that if you're deeply entrenched into a profession or a hobby, you always have 1,000 things that you could do better. But let me maybe try and pick out one that, you know, stands out for me, and that is communicating research findings better, and also become better and bolder at formulating policy recommendations and conclusions from the research that we conduct, which is something that not only in the arena of youth research that researchers tend to traditionally shy away from. And I give you maybe an example with an institution that is particularly large, but also sometimes particularly unfit to deal with research knowledge, because, you know, everything that we have done in our research in RAY around the European youth programs under the umbrella of the partnership, the Council of Europe, the European Union, but also the European Youth Forum and many youth organizations that have conducted research, shows very, very clearly, academic institutional research the same, that we do not really have a skill problem in Europe. So it's not a matter of young people not having the right skills, but that we have a labor provision and labor offer problem in Europe. That the labor market does not manage to provide jobs that correspond to the skill set of young people who are very well educated on average in the meantime. So then when the European Commission comes out with a proposal for the next generation of the European Youth Program that puts an additional emphasis on skills development and labor market readiness of young people, then I have to say, as a researcher, I just want to, I don't know, a mixture of cry and shout, because it's like, that's not the problem, and you should know better. It's like we don't need a labor market skill development program. We need changes in the labor market and the kinds of jobs that we make available to young people for the way that we educate them in. But especially we need programs that strengthen and help us defend and rebuild and reinvent democracy. And it's frustrating that, you know, we have an institution like the Council of Europe where the Secretary General just 2 weeks ago in Malta has spelled that out very, very clearly, but they don't really have the resources to do enough about it. And then we have an institution that actually has the resources to do something about it, but they are stubborn in not recognizing the research findings. But part of that is on us, right? Part of it is on us not being loud enough, not being clear enough, and not being strong enough in saying, this is what the research shows, this is what the evidence says, and then this is unequivocal, right? There is no doubt about it. It's not one of these research findings where we're still dabbling and trying to find out and experimenting. No, we know. We don't have a skills problem. Move on. And so I would say that's maybe one area where research should get very much better very, very quickly, please.
And what you're pointing is also has to do a lot the perception of young people. As always, there's criminalization or stigmatization of young people that they don't want to work and they are lazy. And we have to need policies to make them employable, while there's not enough discussion on active labor market policies. Sladjana, with your years of experience, how would you answer our audience member?
I would say that I couldn't agree more with you, Andreas. On the other hand, the youth researchers are not decision makers. And we need to become aware of that. So sometimes we need to be louder. I do agree. And the knowledge translation needs more attention, I would say, at the European level, but also especially at the national and local level. Some years ago, I was involved in one of the projects which was mapping so-called youth knowledge networks in Europe. You know, so I mean, at the European level, we can obviously recognize massive improvements when it comes to the role of youth research in shaping and informing the policy making, but it doesn't have to be the case at the national level. Many member states, not only EU, but also Council of Europe member states, are struggling really to have basic structures, basic authorities, if you like, or individuals that are capable of taking the torch, you know, of evidence-based policy making. So, you know, and sometimes we should step out of our autistic bubble, you know, and learn how to communicate with the people, with different sectors, how to simplify, how to highlight the key findings. You know, the newcomers, especially the practitioners, have no time. I mean, the policymakers also have no time. Sometimes we don't have time to read massive volumes. You know, it's good to have them, of course, but we need to learn how to get to the point and how to sometimes be aware that our knowledge informs action. So this emphasis on what's next, what action is going to follow, you know, the data is something that we need to emphasize a bit more, I would say.
Thank you. This youth bubble you mentioned, we often hear this youth bubble, the practitioners hear it, but there's also the youth research bubble. You mentioned it in terms of talking to the practitioners and policymakers, but what about youth research and youth work not speaking within their ecosystem? So can you elaborate a little bit more? We still have some little time, but what about cross-sector? How can we connect more effectively across sectors? As you, in your opening, you mentioned it's a very complex thing, the youth life. There is education, there is health, there is governance. Andreas mentioned politics and democracy. So how to make youth research part of a wider societal debate? Yes, we need to talk with each other, but what do we say? What do we listen? Can you talk a little bit more on this dialogue?
Yes, thank you, Özge. I would say with you know, putting the youth perspective and youth mainstreaming on the policy agenda, both institutions provided opportunity for youth researchers across Europe to really understand that we can also do much more in terms of supporting the governance, better governance within the youth sector. What does this mean? I mean, it's a pioneering, there are pioneering steps, I would say, made these days. The European Commission, for example, you know, is doing a lot, and the EU Youth Coordinator, obviously, to, you know, put the different DGs, you know, around one table at least, or to, you know, appoint the contact persons and to start collecting knowledge one way or another from different sectors, different policy policy arenas, I would say, or areas. I'm not sure what's the idea and what will be the role of youth researchers within this governance model, but I would say that our role could be much more than mapping the existing, you know, youth perspective and youth mainstreaming tools and mechanisms, and you know, debating on how the youth mainstreaming has been defined across Europe and internationally, you know. So this is the first step, but I would say that the role of youth researchers really could be much more in informing this new form of governance, I would say, and in replacing, redefining its role in the supporting youth perspective, but also youth mainstreaming, not only at the European level, but also at the lower levels of governance. Oh, another important thing, I would say that the youth researchers could play a key role in supporting knowledge production in the unlikely situation of the new crisis, right? I was the part of this team which was designing and providing content for the COVID knowledge platform developed and launched by the partnership. So I was working on it more than 2 years, and it's an outstanding experience. I think we were really helping different actors, sectors, and institutions to figure out what's going on, to digest the knowledge, to provide meta-analysis, and so on and so forth. We will see. I mean, I'm not saying that we are waiting for the next crisis, to find and redefine our role, but obviously the role of youth researchers was massive also in this context.
And especially in times where we need to generate and act quickly, such initiatives are very important.
Exactly.
Andreas, on the same topic, and to conclude on my last question to you, on this research practice policy dialogue, because you said we need to speak louder, we need to speak more efficient, but it works. I mean, do you have any examples, any models where it works, and any last comments before we conclude on the topic?
Before I answer this this very cute question about some of our formats, let me just say, I think what we researchers need to be clearer about to ourselves is we are researching a part of the population that will be in most European societies for the foreseeable future at a structural disadvantage, right? Young people are fewer and fewer. Our societies are growing older and older, and we have seen this in policy making over the past decade, if not longer. And I think we need to also be clearer to ourselves and more honest what our role in this could be. So why are we developing a youth participation index, but not a youth rights index, for example, right? We also need to get tougher in how we not only research young people, but in particular how we stand for the interest of young people who we research and also who we do research with together, because participatory research, luckily, is a growing part of the work that we do. But yes, Eske, we do have, I think, formats that work very well. We just did a couple of weeks ago in July, at the end of July, we did a policy event in Brussels where we invited members of parliament, their staff, scientific staff of the fractions and the administration together with the European Parliamentary Research Service, EPRS. And that was really a lovely event that generated a lot of interest and where the discussions were sincere and where the interest was genuine. And I really, really liked that format. We also have a larger format in Ray that we do regularly, the Triangular Summit, where we bring together policymakers, practitioners, research from academic institutions, researchers from Ray, researchers from the pool of European youth researchers, youth organizations, really cutting across the entire sector. Increasingly also colleagues from adult education, because we now have a sister network for adult education RIA. And the next one is going to be next year in autumn. So look out for that. It's one of the most successful formats and events that we have. You see a little snapshot there of one of the panels, but there are also lots of discussion groups and always enough time to also discuss during sessions and in between sessions. So I can only encourage you, if you haven't been to one of them, join us in Ireland next October for the next Triangular Summit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was making notes of that. And thank you. I want to thank both of you, Sladjana Petkovic and Andreas Karsten, for your reflections, your work, your continuous contributions to the European youth research community, and this very informative speech, this dialogue. I've been taking notes. I can't get the academic and researcher out of me. I made so many notes that I wish I can read my handwriting later, and I hope our audience found it useful as well. Thank you for joining us in this youth research dialogue. Today's conversation reminds us that the RAY network is not only about generating, analyzing numbers and data and words. It's about dialogue, it's about evidence management, and it's about stakeholder engagement. RAY network helps us to make sense of what young people experience, how youth work evolves, and how programs translate into real change. We invite all of you listening to explore RAY's findings, share them, use them in your own work, engage in these conversations, and be part of this dialogue, because evidence only becomes powerful when it is shared and it's used.
Thank you, Ozga, also for this. And when we are on topic of sharing, we also invite you to share this video with others in case if you want to rewatch it or your colleagues missed it. We really invite you to share because sharing is caring. And of course, you will get a lot of important information inside.
Yeah. Thank you to Domagoj. Thank you to Özkan so much, and also to our speakers. From my side, I want to give you a bit of forward looking. Our next youth research dialogue is on the 10th of December. So save the date. We will talk about our RayLearn research project on organizational learning. You can always check out our website and social media pages. And yeah, I'm very happy when we can welcome you again. And I want to end with a quote from Özkan. Until next time, let's keep walking, even if backwards, into the future. Bye.